Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to wait for one more second for people to find their seats and their little earpieces. I apologize already. I don't speak any Russian, so I'm very grateful for you to listen to me with the earplugs in. Thank you so much. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Dani Spiller, and I'm the head of digital capacity building at the United Nations Development Program. So what I do there is I design and provide trainings for our colleagues, for people around the globe in digital capacity building, broadly speaking, and we focus, of course, on different technologies, including artificial intelligence. And I'm very grateful today because I'm currently here in Minsk, in Belarus, with my colleagues, with the country office, in order to provide a training here for our colleagues in design thinking, product management, and digital product design. And I was invited to speak here today about how we approach artificial intelligence and what we do about artificial intelligence in terms of innovation and regulation. And I'm very grateful to be able to share that today with you here. So, all right. You see the slides here in Russian. You will see me here. I need my slides in English, so I'll be kind of jumping back and forth a little bit. I hope those match those. All right. We're talking about artificial intelligence today and how artificial intelligence, how this space, how it is important right now to balance and find a balance between regulation and innovation. I don't know what happened there to the screen, but I hope you can read that. So, we're currently standing at the edge of a cliff, it seems, with regards to this new technology. Microsoft right now is building 5 times the AI computing power per month than the total AI compute that it had in November. So the growth is exponentially fast, and it's almost hard for us to keep up. There's extremely big developments happening. You all know about large language models. Some of you have used Claude, ChatGPT, and all the others. What we're seeing right now with this extreme speed of the computing power, we have now small language models. These small language models, they have the same power like ChatGPT 3.5, but you can run it on your phone. And you can run it offline. This is how quickly this went from last year to now. And this, of course, has regulatory implications. Now, if you're not online anymore with something, there is, of course, something in terms of control that gets lost. There's massive improvements in speed, of course. So what we needed several data centers for, even a couple of months ago, now we can run with rather simple devices, right? So I believe every government, every country right now needs to decide where it wants to position itself in terms of innovation and regulation, how it creates a flourishing ground for AI as an innovation, but at the same time also making sure that we're taking into account the risks that come with this technology. Oh. Here we go. Oh, let's go one back. Here we go. It looks like somebody burned the screen there in the corner. I don't know what happened there. What this slide tells us is, right now, regardless of regulation, all the innovation, the most money is poured into this technology in the USA. So the United States of America are currently leading the race, so to speak. And as you can see, China comes right second, and then a whole lot of other countries. So most of the innovation, and that has also something to do when we look at the data sets that most of the AI is trained on, is usually from the Anglo-Saxon world, right? So there's also a bias in the AI towards English-speaking data sets at the moment. what I want to share with you today is this. I want to briefly, I'm sure you, being here at this conference, you all know about AI, but I want to briefly take care of some terminology to get everybody here in the room on the same page. I want to talk about the different types of AI, but then I want to jump into how to govern AI and really finding a sweet spot for good policy and regulation and creating a fertile ground for good innovation. And then I'll share some practical use cases with you. Right. Here we go. What is intelligence? When we talk about intelligence, I hope it says this correctly. We usually narrowly define intelligence as the capacity to solve problems. And that's what we expect these machines now to do, right? That's what we built them for. And that can happen in many different ways. So, when we're looking at AI, we have AGI and narrow artificial intelligence. So when we talk about narrow artificial intelligence, those of you who are aware of this, it's AI that performs a particular task, right? It cannot solve unfamiliar problems. And a good example for that is I like to, and some of you maybe too, I play chess every day on my phone. That is a very simple AI that does one particular task and it does it really good. It beats me most of the time. And there's artificial general intelligence, right? And this is supposedly similar to human intelligence in terms of its problem-solving capacity, even better, right? But it's also self-learning. So it has human-like decision-making power and the cognitive capacities to do so. Let me click this. Here we go. Those were my talking points here. However, with this AGI, we're not there yet, it seems, at least for what we know. We don't know what happens behind doors at OpenAI and many of the other big companies that are working on that, but it looks like we're not there yet, but we're getting closer day by day. And there comes, of course, massive risks with that. I was reading this morning, in the newspaper, that there's a couple of whistleblowers from OpenAI who worked on OpenAI artificial intelligence, and they say even the company is not quite so sure how the machines that they're building are doing the task they're doing. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy now between the builders of the machines and the machines themselves. So this is what we're facing right now. And there's, of course, as you can imagine, certain dangers involved in that. Another way of thinking about that, so for those of you who are not so familiar with AI, the way I like to think about it is like we have book-smart AI, and then we have self-learning AI. That's a good way, I think, of thinking about it. As I said already, book-smart AI does this, right? It's based on specific knowledge, rule-based reasoning, it lacks learning ability, and it's like something like the chess computer. And then you have the self-learning AI that adapts and learns, recognizes patterns. It's artificial neural networks, and one of those examples would be the large language models that you probably have played with by now. We all have used them in one form or another, like ChatGPT. A couple of other terminology I would like to share with you is this. Artificial intelligence involved, of course, using computers to do things that traditionally were problems solved by humans. And what we're talking about here, this means that we're creating algorithms that classify, analyze, and draw predictions from data, but it also involves acting on data and learning from data. So some other terms I wanted to share with you just to have this kind of broad understanding. We're talking about machine learning, which is a subset of AI that enables computer to learn from data. We're talking about deep learning, another term that I hope some of you have heard. It's a type of machine learning based on neural networks, so it tries to replicate almost the human brain, these neural networks that we have. And then natural language processing, again, the large language models are a great example of that. All right. This is the background against which I want to talk now with regards to regulating and I think the Russian translation is something like balance, finding the balance between regulation and innovation. I have here, yeah, between regulation and innovation. And it is a balancing act, I think, for governments across the globe right now. I'm going to take you back in history for a second. This is the first Kodak camera, invented in 1885, I believe, something like this. This was a completely new technology to capture somebody's image. Before that, you had to take an hour to paint somebody, right? And with this new technology, a whole new set of regulations was suddenly demanded and was necessary, right? So what I want to say with this is every technology needs certain regulation. What we found with this, it's 1888. Oh, it's 1888. This first Kodak camera, what it created was the need for new privacy laws. Because suddenly, what about the right of your image? Could somebody just take your image and share that with others? So a whole new set of laws suddenly needed to be created. So we as human beings, every time a new technology is put forward, our legal systems, our regulatory frameworks have to adapt. So it's not new to us, but now we're having a technology that poses slightly bigger dangers, potentially, than this Kodak camera. What we're experiencing right now in the world in terms of responding to this new technology is an AI regulation divide. Some countries are pouring loads and loads of money, like the Americans, loads of money into the development of artificial intelligence, and they're starting to regulate it and create a regulatory framework so companies can actually act appropriately. Other countries, other regions do not do that right now. So this creates a divide in the world where some countries are taking a step forward in that race and others are lagging behind. So just to give you a couple of examples, you probably have heard about the EU AI Act. So the European Union has put a regulatory framework forward, which is very much on the side of regulation. There is a criticism about it, and I go a little bit deeper into it, about it not leaving much space for innovation. The White House, of course, I already mentioned, the Americans have put forward already, it's almost a year ago now, that they put forward the White House executive order under the Biden administration that regulates the American AI evolution. We have Britain with its AI policy, and I'm also going to talk a little bit more about that. Also more on the side of innovation than regulation, but also we have international organizations like the UN itself, but also the OSCE, UNESCO, etc., trying to drive innovation and regulation in this space. If you want to learn more about this global AI law and policy tracker, it's quite interesting because in the annex they have a list of all the countries and what their regulatory frameworks are. So this is actually a great learning tool to see, like, where does a country like Belarus, where do we want to position ourselves and what do others do? So you can start comparing. It's quite interesting. So let's talk a bit about this balancing act between regulation and innovation. At the beginning of a new technology, no regulation seems first nice for the private sector. Because it's the Wild West and you can just build whatever you want, right? We've seen this with other technologies. Blockchain technology was for a long time pretty wild. Everybody was building whatever was possible. However, there's a problem when there's too little or no and unclear regulation, because eventually there's no investment coming. Companies, investors stop investing in a technology because it's not clear what's going to happen next. So a good regulatory framework is actually powerful for an ecosystem to thrive and to build. And nowadays, this is just to stay with this example of blockchain technology. Now new regulation has entered and blockchain, cryptocurrencies have entered the common market. There's different companies now investing in these cryptocurrencies. So what was the Wild West before, now is regulated and an ecosystem can grow. If you, however, put too much regulation on a new ecosystem, you can also stifle the growth. So naturally, companies will not have the space to develop. And one side note that has to be made specifically to AI, you all probably have heard this in other talks before. AI poses, because we were not so sure where this speedy development goes, it poses a big risk. So good regulation around those risks is actually very possibly necessary. So let's go together to Brussels for a moment in our minds, not really, and have a look what the people in the EU Parliament and in the Commission have developed. So the EU AI Act is aimed at regulating the development of this new technology. And I've tried to summarize this here for you to some degree. It says that AI systems should be safe, transparent, traceable, non-discriminatory and environmentally friendly, so that the technology around it, what energy consumptions, etc. means, is also environmentally friendly. One important point that the EU AI Act points out is that the AI systems have to be overseen by people. Now, somehow it goes without saying, but what we're seeing already, that certain decision-making can be put on the AI. And there's an ethical question. If a machine makes a decision for humans, who do you hold responsible? So there's a big question around that. So the EU AI Act introduced that AI systems have to be overseen by people rather than automation to prevent these harmful outcomes. And there's something else very, very important. We are experiencing this speed of technology, this very speedy development. Whatever definitions we come up with right now, they have to also fit next year, the year after, the year after. So it has to be somehow neutral and adaptable, that we can actually stay up to the speed of the technological development. So the EU has developed a very basic risk framework, and I think this is quite useful to think about how you here in Belarus, how other countries might want to regulate AI. First and foremost, you need a risk framework, and there are certain risks that the EU has decided are unacceptable. That makes sense, right? If there's problems coming with the technology. Then there's high risks, and there's limited risks. So this is the basic framework the EU has established. Let me talk a little bit about unacceptable risks. All AI systems that somehow pose a threat to people are considered unacceptable. Those include cognitive behavioral manipulation. So you can think, for example, of a voice-activated toy aimed at children, right? You can influence a whole generation. So this is something that's actually listed as such. There is social scoring systems that that the EU has listed under this EU AI Act. This is scoring systems. I don't know how much you know about social scoring, but it's a system that classifies people based on behavior, socioeconomic status, etc., and then makes automated decisions. So there's no human being making the decision. It would be a computer, the AI, making the decision about how to treat a person, how to interact with that person socially. And there's, of course, a massive danger there. And then finally, there's real-time and remote biometric identification systems. You all know about, probably seen here also at the conference, we do biometric identification. You all have a face scan on your phone nowadays, right? We have fingerprint scans, etc. That's all fine and good, but now imagine you have facial recognition software, but then there's an AI behind it that makes decisions about you as individuals. The EU has put some exceptions into it for law enforcement. You can imagine there's maybe a need for law enforcement, and again, this has to be taken with a grain of salt and with some care. There's some high risks that the EU AI Act lists, and those include specifically, it's going a little too fast there. So first of all, there's AI systems that are used for products falling under the EU product safety line. I'm sure you have your product safety legislation here to make sure that consumers are protected, and the same is true for AI. So this includes, again, toys, for example, but aviation, right? Your airplanes need to be safe, and the computers that nowadays we already know that most planes start and land pretty independently, but how much of that decision making do you want to take away from that, and does it comply with the natural safety standards that you have in a country? Then we have the AI systems falling under specific areas that needs to be registered in a database, right? So that there's an oversight there. And that, for example, includes the management and operation of critical infrastructure. So power plants, right? Nuclear power plants specifically, who might be federal, but power in general. You might have other critical infrastructure. The internet nowadays, right? Connectivity, etc., can also be critical. We have education and vocational training. So school systems, for example, like are there machines behind it that make decisions about the children, how they are scored, etc.? That could be something. Or employment, worker management, etc. And it's not only the worker management, but also, as you all know, AI and the labor market are closely interrelated, and there will be changes in the next couple of years on how we work. All of these systems need to be assessed before being put on the market. Right? And there's a process that the EU has put forward that is being assessed, and then it will be reassessed and reassessed throughout the life cycle. And then let me just share with you some limited risks. This is what falls under limited risk. This is what you probably all know. These large language models, like ChatGPT, they're considered providing a limited risk. Right? However, there's certain things we also should adhere by. I don't know about you, but I write many, many emails and many documents nowadays with a large language model, with the help of these machines. But we also have to label it, right? It's not our mind that has produced it. So it's good to say this image has been produced by AI, this text has been produced by AI. So to be aware of it and make the audience or the people who read it or consume it aware of that. There's something I want to say here. There's some risks here, and that's an interesting, strange ethical discussion. ChatGPT, many other models can produce images now. And when they're offline, it's easy to control that, what is possible and what isn't. So you probably have used ChatGPT and it didn't do what you wanted to do. That probably has happened to all of us. You ask it to generate certain images or other models, certain videos, it will not do it. There are right now offline models that do whatever you say. So I want to give you an example. You can produce very realistic videos right now of anything, really. So think of child pornography. That's possible right now. Very easily, very quickly. There's no victim, but you're playing to a specific audience, right? And you can generate this very easily, offline, without any control. How do you regulate such a space? So this is an ethically very difficult space that a country has to think about how it wants to approach it and how to tackle that problem. And you can imagine there's many other illegal components that you could introduce here. The EU, as so often, it's said that the EU over-regulates. I'm not sure here because we have to be somehow risk adverse, but we see a tendency in other countries to regulate differently. So I want to share that with you, what the UK is doing with its AI policy, and it leans more towards innovation. What they have emphasized in the UK is a less centralized approach compared to the European Union. The policy is built around 6 principles. Those are AI safety, so they do consider safety important, technical security, transparency, fairness, legal responsibility, and clear routes for redress or contestability, so that users can actually approach a court, the legal system, if they have been harmed in some way or another. And regulators are also encouraged to a proportionate approach to HI risks. But it provides, in general, a much larger space for innovation on the UK side. And maybe together with that, I just want to say quickly, the UK had the AI summit some time ago, and they just finished last month the Seoul AI summit that they co-hosted again. That was happening in Korea. And the focus areas were mainly, the focus areas were mainly AI safety. And what they looked at here specifically is strengthening international cooperation. AI, as so many new technologies, you can't really regulate them just in your country, because it's like trying to control the internet from one country. It's very difficult because you have a VPN, you cannot go outside of that, and the same is true for other technologies like AI. You cannot just do it in your country. It's a global technology and it's a global issue that comes with it. They focused on innovation, so how can we promote innovative AI technology? So they made a particularly strong focus on innovation and how to create an ecosystem where companies can, in a safe way, develop these technologies. And another point that they felt was important to mention is inclusivity, that across the board, people have access to AI. It's quite interesting. We at UNDP, we talk a lot about the digital divide and how some people, like here in Belarus, most people have access to the internet, I would assume. In many countries where we work, in Africa and in Asia, that's not the case, and that prevents people from participating in society, participating in the advantages that the internet, or technologies in this case, AI provides. So making sure that this is happening. If you want a good case study and a good leading example of how to regulate AI well, the Singaporean government has apparently, according to many, done a pretty good job. They're currently ranked oh, now I don't know where I am. Let me quickly see if I can go back a little bit. Here we are. This is it. The Singaporean government is right now ranked second in Oxford AI Readiness Index. If you want to look into different rankings across the globe, Oxford has this AI Readiness Index that shows you where a country is positioned right now. It's judged on investment, it's just on technological development, but also on regulation. So they're ranked really, really high. And they've also developed a very powerful AI strategy that you can look at. So some governmental AI standards that I want to share with you from the Singaporean government. So first of all, they've said, let's treat AI as essential. It's not a side note anymore. You can't, in today's world, just think of AI as one other technology, like I said earlier, blockchain or whatever. I think it is too important, and the Singaporeans have recognized that. It is something that is essential and that will change work, life, everything we do. They also said we need a global approach. I already mentioned that. We cannot just think of ourselves in our own bubble, in our own country. We need to think about our neighbors and the rest of the globe, because this technology will change everything around the globe, from all we know right now. We need broad implementation, shifting from isolated projects to a more kind of holistic system-wide application of AI. And when we talk about innovation again, the Singaporeans also said we need some goals for excellence and empowerment, meaning they want to aim for the highest standards of quality, of course, but also of security. I'm working for UNDP, I'm working for the UN, so I have to also share some of our guidelines and our principles. And I think from an ethical perspective and from a risk management perspective, this can be quite useful also for regulators in the future to follow this. We have this AI governing AI for Humanity report, this interim report. It will be finished in 6 months from now, so right now we're at this interim stage. I just want to share those 5 principles with you. So first of all, any AI, any new technology, but any AI should be for the benefit of all. So that idea of inclusivity, that people have access to it and can benefit from it. It should be in the public interest. It has to be aligned with data and IP governance. So here we also have to think about how we're collecting data, how are we sharing data, how are we treating data in general. And there's a lot of ethical implications with that too. AI has to be created through agile networked collaboration. So here also the network collaboration is also the idea of a global approach. And of course, there's an idea of bringing it in line with the UN Charter and with the SDGs, right? So that the AI kind of falls into these and follows these 5 principles. Now I've shared a lot with you and talked a lot. Usually I like to interact a little bit more, but my language skills do not allow me. I want to leave you with a checklist. It's not an exclusive checklist. It's to share like an idea with you. I think regulators, policymakers, the private sector, the public sector in cooperation have to sit together and kind of decide like where do we want to position ourselves. And here are some ideas that I think from this presentation that I hope are helpful to guide such discussion. Every regulator will have to think about differentiating different risks levels. How you do that, the EU did it in one way with these unacceptable risks, high risks, low risks. There might be other risks you want to take into consideration. But I think differentiating these risks levels, not all technology is right now the same. There has to be transparency and explainability. What that means is that we understand how the technology was created, what are the data sets it was trained on, how was it created, how do the algorithms work, so it has to be understandable, right? In that way, transparent, and the companies who create them have to be able to explain to you how it's done. As I said earlier, it seems to be the case that some companies are already lagging behind with that and are not able anymore because the machines are training themselves on data sets. It becomes more and more difficult here. As with any technology, we have to think about rights and privacy. I shared with you, I started the conversation with the little Kodak camera, which brought about privacy, but you can now create also, like I can create images of all of you online, right? If I have a picture of you, I can use this. You've all heard about deep fakes and what can be done. So what does that mean for individual rights and their privacy? We can have AI to do certain things for us, but who's controlling the AI? If you automate a process and then you put an AI behind that in order to make the decisions, you're taking out the human decision making, and that has ethical implications. Who do you blame if something goes wrong? Let's say we talk about critical infrastructure like energy production or other things, right? And where there's actually human lives might be on the line. So who do you blame if you don't have a human being who is in the decision-making process and who controls what's happening? So human oversight and with that accountability. Promoting ethical development and use. So this is a more complex question, I think, because ethical standards can differ maybe in different places, but I think there is some general human ethical standards that we can follow. I mentioned this a bunch of times. International cooperation, we can't just think this is our own problem. I think this is a global issue and how we approach this technology, so we can actually all gain from this technology, but also we make sure that we're safe in the use of this technology. And that leads to balancing regulation and innovation. So how do we create a fertile ground in every country here in Belarus for good development? That companies want to invest in this technology and want to drive it forward while making sure we're following these ethical standards, right? And making sure that happens in a safe and secure way. We have to be able to adapt to the rapid technological advancements. If you've been following this space in any way, you've seen like it's incredible. I remember when I first switched on ChatGPT for the first time, it was a bit clunky. It was like I put a prompt and it didn't work, and now it's incredible. The amount of work that went in the last couple of years, it's unbelievable. And this will just continue and the speed will increase. And how do we make sure that our regulatory frameworks are actually adaptable towards that. And then the biggest fear that many have, and this is what we hear again and again, it will change how we work. It already does. It does a lot of work for me, and maybe I become redundant at some point, who knows. But there's many jobs that will change significantly, and some who will become redundant. So how do we as a society deal with that? How do we adapt the workforce? Is there learning processes, whatever the measures may be? How do we adapt to that? This is not an exclusive list. This is some ideas, but I think if any policy advisor, any regulator starts with trying to answer these questions, you're off to a good start. You might be able to design something that makes sense, and then, of course, you will have to dive quite deeply into this. What that means in legal language is a whole different story. So I hope I was able to share something interesting with you. I hope you took something from that inspired you somehow to think about AI and regulation. And I'm going to be here for some questions. I have this little earpiece, so if you want to ask some questions or want to have a conversation, now is the time. You don't have to. Maybe I ask you a question. Is anybody working in this policy advice and regulatory space? Are you most private sector innovators?
Regulation, but not for AI.
Very interesting. Was this somehow what you also experience in your space and what you're thinking about?
It's, for me, it's a wonderful introduction in this AI sphere. And it's something good for ideas.
Wonderful. I'm glad I was able to share something interesting. Everybody else is more from the private sector, I'm assuming, not from the regulatory space, or you're not saying it because you're afraid that I come with a microphone. So. Well, I thank you for having me. I'm very, very grateful that I was able to speak here today, and I wish you a wonderful evening. Bye.